George Herbert. Today we are going to be discussing this metaphysical poet. He's very different from, say, the likes of John Donne and Andrew Marvell. And also, with this piece of poetry, today I bring a strain of metaphysical poetry to you, which is very unique. It has little to do with the themes that people like Donne and Marvell were exploring, because this is metaphysical devotional poetry. And the conceits here are absolutely present, but they are with respect to nature, with respect to God, with respect to devotion and spiritualism. George Herbert was a metaphysical poet born in 1593, lived up to 1633. He was an Anglican priest, he was a theologian and a poet. He was such a good orator that for a time being he also served as parliamentarian. And then he realized that his true calling lay in serving God. So he gave up his civilian life and he was ordained as a priest in the Church of England. And from there on, he wrote a lot of religious poems. He was one of the best known preachers of the church. And today, the poem that we are going to be discussing here also speaks about these themes which were closest to his heart. This is a poem where what God thought when He made man, this is brought into discussion. Now, the title of the poem is The Pulley. Now, you tend to think that pulley is an equipment. You learn about the pulley in physics. Pulley is basically a rope and a wheel arrangement where the rope passes over the wheel, and this arrangement is used to lift heavy weights, or basically sometimes also a transfer of weight between the wheel and the cable happens so that the weight can be handled. So this is a pulley. Now, why is it that Herbert uses the term pulley for a poem which is devotional in nature? We'll see as we read the poem. I'll go through the poem stanza by stanza, but first I will tell you about the unique nature of the conceit that Herbert employs here. In other pieces of poetry, like when we read to his poem Mistress, or when we did Death Be Not Proud, we discussed conceits in stanzas, we discussed conceits in lines. Here the entire theme of the poem is a conceit. And he uses, like I said, an equipment that we learn about in physics, the pulley. And we were discussing in the earlier videos that metaphysical poetry draws a lot of its inspiration from the scientific inventions that were happening around then. And the pulley also seems to come from this scenario, though it may not be an invention of that period, it could be much earlier. But the fact that metaphysical poetry drew from science and from the way things worked, this is a very important example that Herbert uses the term pulley. He could have used many other ways of titling his poem, because the word pulley is not mentioned in the poem at all. It is just the title of the poem, and therefore this entire poem is a conceit. He imagines one act of God equal to the act or the role that a pulley plays. And let's see how he does that. The poem begins, "When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings standing by, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches which dispersed lie contract into a span." So here he's saying that when God first made man, he had a glass of blessings and he thought, I'll pour all the blessings on the man and all the world's riches shall be his, and which are right now dispersed, but I will gather them, collect them and give them all to this man. And look at the last line, contract into a span. A span, which is the distance between 2 points. Again, this is a very scientific term to use. He's basically saying that I'll bless a human body with many riches, and he refers to this body as a span. Again, this must be the impact of his time that he uses a scientific term. For example, you talk about the span of an arch or the span of a bridge. So he says the span of the human body, and within this span, I'll bring all these riches and I'll contract them, bring them all together so that they occupy less space and come closer to each other, and therefore I shall bless the man with everything at my disposal. Let's look at the next stanza. So strength first made a way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, pleasure. When almost all was out, God made us stay, perceiving that alone of all his treasure rest in the bottom lay. Now, the poet started with this metaphor that the Almighty God, he had a glass of blessings and he poured it onto man. So what all did he pour? He poured strength, he gave man beauty, he gave him wisdom or her wisdom, honor, pleasure, and almost everything was done. The glass was hitting the bottom. And then God realized that there was a blessing called rest, which was at the bottom of the glass. Rest in the bottom lay. Now God thinks to himself, look at the next stanza. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adore my gifts instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature, so both should losers be. Now God is thinking to himself that if I bestow this jewel, the jewel of rest, if this blessing also I bestow upon this human being, then what will happen is that he would adore my gifts rather than adoring me. If he is not restless, if he is completely at peace, completely at rest, he will simply enjoy the gifts that I have given him, and he will forget that there is a creator. He will forget that there is a power higher than him. He will forget that a lot of joy lies in prayer and in devotion. So maybe I should not give him rest, because if I do that, then with this treasure, both of us would be losers. He will not rise to realizing that there is a higher power to this universe which he has to understand and then revere, and I will lose a disciple. I and also my creation, the human being, will not grow further from wherever he or she is. So both will be losers. My creation would be stuck, and he or she on their part would not be able to make sense of the universe. So he says that he would adore my gifts instead of me and rest in nature, not the God of nature. He would have fun with nature but not realize that there is a God to this nature, so both should losers be. Both of us would end up losers in this bargain. So maybe I should not give this blessing to him. Look at the last stanza then. Yet keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Let him be rich and weary, that at least, if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. Now he says, I'll let him keep the rest. Not that I'll not bless him with any rest, but I will give a little bit of it, not completely like I gave all the other things. I will give him a small portion of the blessing of rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Every man shall have a large dose of restlessness within him. Every man shall not be completely at peace, completely at rest, but there will be a lot of restlessness in his or her heart. Let him be rich, but let him be weary as well. Weary, to be tired. So he'll be rich, but at the same time, he will get tired. Now here, tiredness doesn't just mean physical tiredness. There could be physical tiredness, there could be mental tiredness, sometimes there could be existential tiredness. Let the man feel weary. Let him have existential issues. Let him think about things as to how they work, where do they come from, where are they heading. If goodness lead him not. Now sometimes we tend to think, oh, we are so blessed. We have such a beautiful, wonderful, bountiful nature, and this we have not created, but this has been given to us, and therefore we should praise the Lord who gave us this nature. So in goodness we are led to God. But God is thinking that if the human being does not come to me in realizing that nature is bountiful and therefore there is a God, then he will surely come to me when he's tired, when he's weary. So weariness would lead him to me, if not goodness. The goodness also should lead him to me. And then this weariness may toss him to my breast. If he's weary, if he's tired, he would come back to me. So God is holding the pulley of rest upon the man and not setting him free. He can rein him in when he wants to with the pulley. The Pulley by George Herbert. Thank you.